Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar. We're just going to give a couple of minutes for all of our audience members to filter in and then we will get started. Hello everyone and welcome to this Inside Housing webinar on making the most of solar in 2026. My name is Claire Reid. I'm a contributor to Inside Housing and I'm your chair for today's event, which is being run in association with SureServe. I have alongside me, virtually speaking, our panelists, so let me introduce you to them too. Paul Newman, I was making you a film star, Paul. Paul Norman is Director of Asset Strategy at Clarion Housing Group, which manages around 125,000 homes across England. And so, as you may well know, is one of the largest housing associations in the country. Tom Griffith is Solar Business Development Lead at Octopus Energy, where he leads on the company's tenant power tariff. That's intended to help social landlords earn returns from solar and battery installations while also reducing tenant bills. And last but not least, Simon Spencer is Business Development Manager for SureServe Energy Services Southwest. He works with SureServe clients to help deliver sustainable improvements to homes, thereby reducing energy costs for residents. Together, we're going to be discussing solar energy, a topic that feels especially relevant on what here in London, at least, feels like the first day we've seen the sun in months. I hope it's the same wherever you are joining us from today. It's a relevant topic too, of course, given the UK government's plan for clean energy. The government has made clear its firm belief in the value of solar. The new Warm Homes Plan, which was published almost exactly a month ago, is part of an intention to treble the UK solar capacity by 2030. It's anticipated the new Future Home Standard for England will see solar panels on new social homes becoming mandatory. So the question becomes, what does getting the most benefit out of solar look like for social landlords and social tenants as 2026 begins? And that, as you know, is what we're going to be exploring today. To explain the format of today's webinar, in a moment, I'm going to hand over to our panelists, each of whom will give a brief presentation, and then we will have a question and answer session. If you're watching live, that's your opportunity to tell us what you'd like to talk about. If you do have a question you'd like to ask our panel, just follow the prompts on your screen and I'll bring in your questions once we reach the discussion portion of today's session. To answer one of the questions we get most frequently, yes, don't worry, an on-demand recording of this webinar will be made available. You'll be sent details as soon as it is, and any colleague who may have wanted to join us live today but wasn't able to will be able to register to see that recording as well. For now, though, it is time to hand over to our panelists to speak. And first up, I'm delighted to welcome Paul Norman, who's Director of Asset Strategy at Clarion Housing Group. Paul, over to you.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, and apologies that I am not Paul Newman. I'm sure there's a few people that dropped off on the point of finding out that I'm not that star. So yeah, just wanted to take a few minutes to talk you through what our journey's been so far over the last 5 years around solar, a little bit around how we do some selection around those properties, and just a few lessons that have been learned over that period. So it's been a busy time. We have about 3,500 homes that have solar installations. Some of that is retrofit, some of that is through new build. Last year, we delivered a zero build solution, not only in new build developments, but also a retrofit version on existing homes, working in partnership with Energy Spawn and Octopus. We completed a pilot of 100 homes installing PV as an inline solution. So as part of that roof replacement, PV being installed as part of the roof. And we're now in the process of doing that similar pilot, but now wrapping that up alongside battery installations and trying to understand that customer journey from that perspective. Solar and battery technology plays a massive part in our long-term financial plan and our asset strategy, Clarion 2050. So we estimate that circa 45,000 homes and around 1,000 blocks have the potential of having solar PV installed for benefiting of our residents. And a part of that journey is also moving us to a place-based approach, so a place-based delivery model that not only enables us to scale from a delivery point of view and give visibility to contractors, but it also starts to unlock some of the potential around innovative financial models. Now, that journey hasn't just been a technical one. We've done an awful lot of work with customers, but there is some good news around that. So when we've talked to customers and engaged with them, 86% of customers straight off the bat want solar. They understand it. They see it as a good thing, which is really positive, and the engagement we've had with them today has been based around that. We've actually done 9 face-to-face sessions with a dedicated customer group to talk about solar, from anything about how it's installed, positioning of things, questions they might ask, things that they want to know afterwards to make sure that they get the best out of it. And that's been delivered over the last 12 months, and that is an ongoing process to continue iterate how we deliver that particular work stream. Through doing that, we've pretty much got now a clear understanding of what customers' expectation of not only pre and during, but actually that post-installation perspective as well, and how they continue to get the best benefit of that installation that we install. One of the key things around that is establishing show homes. It's proven really popular, but actually what it does is creates a real community feel to projects, and again, that place-based approach enables that to happen, where people can drop in, they can see the technology, it really brings it to life for them. And actually it's a great place to have other conversations as well, and base the delivery team as well, so everyone is working collaboratively in one place. And as I say, part of that piloted place-based approach is we've got 2 place-shaping officers. These are not resident liaison officers. That is not what we're looking to do. This is about how they bring a customer journey way before we even get to the installation stage, the technical side of it, and then importantly during and then after the works to make sure we really embed that technology that we've installed into the customer's home. Property selection is interesting. I mean, about 3 years ago, we did an exercise where we used AI technology and mapped the whole portfolio for PV, so we understand what homes can and can't take it and the kind of expected generation that comes from that. And that's proved pretty invaluable, to be honest with you. And what we're doing is aligning that to programs that align to government funding. We don't see that as the long-term future. We know funding is a really important part of what we need to deliver is programs that are effective and efficient, and government programs don't always enable that. Our strategy is set that clear direction of what we're looking to do. Decarbonisation is very clear. It cannot come at a resident's expense, and that's where the solar and battery element really plays its key part. That renewable heat transition is absolutely critical. And as I say, that place-based approach, we're currently doing a single local authority, and what that's doing is enable us to have better communication and better customer support. As I say, innovative financial opportunities start to become available, and there's significant efficiencies around delivery costs as well.
Paul, can I ask you to lean as close as possible as you can to your microphone? We're slightly losing sound at times. Thank you so much.
Sure, no problems. And as lessons learned goes, I mean, we have learned a whole bunch of lessons, but for me, there's probably 4 that have been absolutely critical. Early engagement with residents is absolutely key. And doing that early has proved absolutely invaluable. It is time well worth spent engaging with residents well in advance of a programme. Understanding customers' current energy consumption is absolutely critical, especially when you start talking to them about potential savings and when you are thinking about looking at innovative financial models like energy as a service, because understanding that consumption actually really starts to help you have a really good conversation with those residents, and it is individual to each and every home. Technology selection, making sure that you're future-proofing what you're doing, safeguarding your assets and protecting the financial savings and revenue streams for you and the customer is critical. There's lots of schemes out there where they talk about it's free, it's 100% funded. I'm wary of those. The things that we've seen, that tends to come at the cost of the technology and the service you get, and doesn't apply to all homes. So that is an area to be considered. And I think pre and post evaluation, again, is absolutely critical. It supports not only good understanding and decision making within an organisation, but one of the absolute best ways of having a conversation with a customer is being able to demonstrate the power and the impact of something that's happened in one of their peers' properties. So at that point, I'll hand back to Claire.
That's great. Thank you so much for loads of interesting stuff in there. Particularly interesting to hear 86% of your residents would like to see solar installed. That's a really high figure and really great to hear. And I'm sure we'll also come back to talking about, as you sensibly touched on, the importance of engagement with residents. And I imagine actually in part that's probably why that figure is so high, because you've done so much engagement work to help residents understand this. And also the place-based delivery model, I'm sure we'll come back to speak to as well. Great start. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. Simon, you're up next.
Thank you. So good morning, Simon Spencer. As mentioned earlier, I'm one of the business development managers here for SureServe Energy Services. You may be aware we're a contractor that specialises in the social housing sector. We install, maintain and monitor solar PV systems. So what we wanted to do today was just talk you through our experiences of delivery, our interactions with our clients, with, again, social housing sector, and what our clients are talking about most at the moment. So next slide, please. So wanted to set the scene a little bit. Lots of considerations for our housing providers. Paul will be fully aware of these. Policy updates, funding options, the requirements of those funding options, net zero targets, compliance pressures, the install costs of solar and the ongoing maintenance of those systems, stock condition and the suitability of solar for those properties. There's the energy prices, resident affordability, which all ties into fuel poverty. There's future-proofing your systems. So what can you connect to your solar PV and what can that power moving forward? There's a consideration around future-proofing your housing stock, and also, as Paul alluded to, it's grid restrictions. So if you're going to deliver a program of solar installs and there's restrictions in that area, we've seen programs that have actually been sort of just halted and stopped because of grid restrictions. So these are all factors that our housing clients have to seriously consider. Now, how do our landlords maximise the benefits of solar for residents? And it's typically in three ways, and it's by providing them additional energy, powering their heating, or through hot water. And we typically see that in most scenarios, those work alongside battery storage, electrical heating systems, and often with boilers where there are hot water cylinders in play. So some of the considerations we'll talk about today will be solar diversion, battery storage, export options, energy aggregations, which typically the scenarios are flats and communal areas, and also community-owned energy initiatives, which is an area that we're seeing become more popular. Next slide, please. So onto our current delivery. One of our clients was looking to make savings in terms of their future roof replacement programs. Westwood Housing we've been working with for many years. We were delivering a multi-measure retrofit scheme for them. Now, in terms of property selection, the properties were picked based around their roof renewal program, and properties that had roof renewals due in the next 5 years were an obvious choice and were picked by our client. Now, the reason they did that is they went for in-roof solar, and they did that versus paying for on-roof solar and at a later date, as part of the roofing program, replacing the roof, removing the panels and putting them back on. So there was quite a substantial saving there for them in terms of those future costs. Things like double scaffolding came into play. So just putting up one lot of scaffolding played a major factor in terms of their long-term costing. So the benefits of those systems are a 15-year product and system warranty. Fire and wind performance on in-roof systems is the highest rating that you can get. They come with a 25-year power performance guarantee. And in terms of Westwood Housing, they're in Devon, so very coastal regions, and they were experiencing a lot of problems with birds nesting. Obviously, that brings the potential of fires and things like that, which is obviously a place that we don't want to be. So by having in-roof, you remove the issue of bird nesting most of the time. It also presented them with a long-term maintenance reduction versus on-roof. So for them, as you can see, the photos, cracking sort of property, and in-roof aesthetically does look very nice. So for them, it was their first venture into in-roof. Next slide, please. So solar compliance and the associated risks. I'm sure Paul will agree this is a big factor for our housing associations and our clients. It's around resident safety, and predominantly it's around the placement of inverters and batteries. And that is because although low, there are fire issue risks ultimately. So as a group, SureServe have developed a fireproof inverter and a battery box. On the right hand side, on the top right, is the inverter box, and the three images across the bottom of the screen are the fireproof battery box. Now, the benefit of these, there are many, so I'll just give you the main ones. It is PAS compliant, so is suitable for retrofit and funding projects. It's a lightweight product, so it can be installed on the outside of EWI systems. It has 1 hour fire resistance. It's fully insulated, so you get no cold spots in the winter. And when it's placed on, a sort of a wall where it's going to receive a lot of sunlight, it reduces solar gain. That means that the equipment doesn't overheat. It's thermostatically controlled via its own ventilation, which means it sucks cold air in and it removes the warm air. So very clever. It has an enclosure window, so it supports EICR checks and general maintenance. And the benefit being is that you don't have to remove it from the wall. So it is really quite a simple process to maintain. And lastly, it's very easily retrofitted. So not only can it be fitted to new PV systems, it can be retrofitted to existing PV systems as well. Now, one additional feature that this system has is an auto shutdown of AC and DC current. And also it comes with an internal fire extinguisher, is probably the best way to put it, where when it detects flames or smoke, it will extinguish those flames and put the fire out. So in terms of the housing scene, it addresses fire safety and regulatory considerations. It supports MCS standards, and ultimately it's about industry best practice, which we know is a key factor for our housing associations and our clients. Next slide, please. So the maximisation of solar, in terms of what we're seeing through our retrofit delivery, through the designs, through the modelling, and importantly, as Paul mentioned, it's around your post evaluation, the results that we're getting from residents in terms of their bills. What we're seeing that ultimately the self-consumption is the key element here, is to use that solar production at source. And as we'll explain in a moment, that will be via heat or via battery, and that is the most effective outcome for the resident. So solar and battery storage is a key one. It ultimately increases the solar value. We use the power when you want it, and you send it where you want. So you either use that as energy overnight, you heat the property, or you can heat your hot water via solar diversion, which we'll come on to. Now, with battery, there are tariffs available, and I'm sure our colleague from Octopus will tell us more about this shortly. There are many tariffs available to charge batteries overnight when the power is cheaper, and then you use that stored energy during the day or in the evening, helping reduce overall costs. And the key outcome here is that it reduces your residents' bills. Solar diversion. Solar diverters, again, common in terms of our solar installs. It heats your hot water in your hot water tank. So think of it as an immersion heater. And we had a conversation with Mixergy fairly recently. Now they likened it to your typical hot water tank of 200 litres, which is fairly common. To heat that by 50 degrees will take 11.5 kilowatts of power. Now, it's a very low cost measure. Probably around £500 to £600 to install a solar diverter. Now, if you think an equivalent size 11.5 kilowatt battery is going to probably cost you about £2,000, very quickly it becomes a low cost measure and something that should be a consideration. Now, as a key, again, this is going to reduce the residents' bills. Onto heat pumps. As we all know, they're very efficient. They're the perfect partner alongside solar installs. A heat pump essentially electrifies a home, and the generated electricity from your solar supports this and allows for heating and hot water within that property. Now, batteries can be paired and would allow you to use the heat pump off-grid in the evening or overnight, bringing further cost savings to that system. So what we are seeing and the feedback we get in general from post information is that solar is an absolute key factor in making air source heat pumps cost effective and reducing residents' bills. So when we are delivering heat pumps, solar is 99 times out of 100 is something that is installed alongside it. Onto communal areas. So this is an area that will benefit our HAs more than the residents so much. If solar is fitted, a way it can be maximised is to support electrical heating within those communal areas. And it can also be used to support electrical consumption, which would typically be LED lighting. Now, we know some of our clients will pay for that. So obviously there's budgets put aside to support heating and electrical lighting within communal areas. If they can offset that and reduce that bill via using solar, then obviously it's a win for themselves. Now, Paul alluded to this earlier. The education and engagement around best practice for residents is a key thing that we do in terms of our installs, and it's just educating residents around using, charging your phones during the day, using the excess energy that is there, using your dishwashers, your tumble dryers when the sun is there. It's about best behaviours and best practice in terms of utilising your solar. The feedback we get from our HAs is that, and it's the most liked and the most welcomed measure when we deliver, is that solar tends to build trust between a housing association and the resident. Residents will see it as they are getting something free and of genuine benefit. So when that is incorporated into a programme, it's very well received. And lastly is your EPC improvement potential for installing solar. Both solar, diverters and batteries will positively impact your EPCs. I'm sure that, again, our colleague from Octopus will back this up later, but export isn't always optimal. Often export rates are much less than the cost to use a kilowatt of energy. Typically, you're looking at maybe 12, 13p for an export versus 28 to 30p for consumption. And this ultimately just backs up the fact that consumption is key. Use that excess solar rather than export it. Next slide, please. So lastly, what do we see as emerging solutions and future challenges? Energy aggregation. So essentially, we're taking surplus electricity from one block of flats and redistributing it to another. On the right-hand side there, you've got two images. Some properties may not be suitable for solar due to structural issues or just for cost reasons. So taking energy from one system and moving it across to other properties is of benefit. You can pair that with shared battery storage options as well. We're aware that Illume SolShare is a system that does this very well. I'm sure there are others in the market. However, in terms of aggregating that energy across to other properties, it's something we're seeing a lot more of. Now, the benefit of this is it benefits all residents. If you're a resident in the block that doesn't have solar, it gives you the opportunity to get that excess sent to your property. It also benefits the EPC ratings as well. So if you are sending that excess energy to the individual properties within those apartments or blocks, the EPC rating for those individual blocks is positively affected, not just the ones that have the solar on the roof. So ultimately, it benefits the housing association as well by, this is another option, is by reducing their energy costs for communals. So you can send all of that excess energy to your communal areas that you may pay for. So community-owned energy initiatives, this is another area that we're seeing come through. Local solar energy projects that are owned and managed by either the residents or the housing associations. And the investment, when we talk about the investment, that's the money that may be saved, or the money from export goes back into the community for reinvestment. Could go back to the HA, or it goes back to the residents in terms of them having reduced bills. So as we've said there, reduced energy rates, this tackles long-term energy cost hikes and is a very sustainable approach. So in summary, in terms of the future, we see solar and battery becoming the standard. We also see smart AI optimization becoming quite a big part of all systems associated to solar, and portfolio smart export guarantee. What we're talking about in terms of the portfolio smart export guarantee is housing associations having all of their housing stock under one smart export guarantee account. We know it's being trialled at present with Good Energy. Very hard to do and it's in its early stages, but if all of the export from all of your properties as a housing association can come back to you as a benefit, if that's the route you decide to choose, then obviously there's some substantial income that will come back into the business. So lastly, on to our challenges. The sunset 2G and 3G switch off. Essentially, the old smart meter upgrades are required, and this is around the communication for reading PV metering systems. 2G and 3G systems are being switched off, 2G by 2033 and 3G went off in November 2025. So we know that 7 million meters will be affected by that, meaning that the PV readings won't go back to the energy providers. That is going to be quite an ongoing job for contractors to go and swap these meters out. And it's also something that our HAs will probably be doing at this point as well, or considering for the future. And lastly, the challenges are grid constraints and export limitations. So DNO delays inevitably, and we've seen it many a time, create restrictions and limit programs in terms of what they can deliver. What we are seeing and what has been announced is an £80 billion off-gem budget for upgrades to create a super grid, and that will happen between 2026 and 2031. Now, that as a constraint ultimately does move the focus from your export. Now, if there are restrictions set on your PV systems across a housing estate, to maximise the resident benefit, you need to focus on putting these systems in that we've discussed today and how you can actually maximise the benefit for the resident. We do appreciate that they have a cost associated, so that is something that has to be weighed up. So in summary, and lastly, consumption is key. Use the solar production at source via heat or via battery, and we have seen over the years that that is the most effective outcome for the residents and normally for the HA. So thank you for your time. Appreciate that.
Great, thanks so much, Simon. Really interesting to hear about some projects that you've specifically been involved in, and again to hear that theme of engagement with residents coming through. It's also really interesting the point you made about the experience of solar building trust between landlords and tenants. And I'm sure that's a point we'll return to. I'm going to move across to Tom in just a moment, but before I do, a quick reminder to anyone watching live that if you have a question you'd like to ask the panel, do pop it in. We're going to be coming to questions after Tom's presentation, so you're running out of time to get your question in. We have already had lots come in, and actually, Simon, while I've got you, as it were, immediately following your presentation, I'll ask you one from Joshua because it's a very specific point on your presentation. Okay. Joshua wants to know the name of the fireproof inverter and battery box product, if you could.
Currently nameless. It's a product we've developed, unfortunately, but what we will do is we will reach out to you guys after this via email, and by all means, we've got data sheets and things. Please, we can have a conversation about that and tell you some more about the system.
Brilliant, thanks, Simon. I kind of like that it's nameless. That's quite cool. The product with no name, maybe that's the name of it. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Tom, over to you now.
Thanks, Claire. Great to be talking here. My name's Tom. I'm the solar development lead at Octopus and work in our built environment team, and I head up our tenant power tariff. So we've heard from Paul that customers want solar. The jury's in on that, and we've heard from Simon that it's increasingly easy to install and the technology is really kind of matured, and it's something that you can get your best bang for buck as a social housing landlord in terms of thinking about different measures that you need to install to upgrade your EPC ratings. Solar and battery is right up there in terms of most savings to your tenants from the money you invest. So what we do at Octopus and what we see some of our smart tariffs doing is connecting some of those dots in the first instance to make it as simple and easy to understand and for tenants to get the benefit from, and secondly to actually generate some return to go back to you as a landlord and enable you really to scale these solutions up and roll them out at mass across all of your houses as well. And that brings me nicely on to our tenant power tariff. So this is a tariff where if you as the landlord install solar and battery on your properties, if your tenants choose to then switch over to us as their supplier and onto this smart tariff, then they will get a fixed 30% discount on their bill, and you as the landlord will receive a return on your investment too. Thanks for clicking through there, Claire. So this is it laid out very in a couple of worked examples. So here on the right, you can see that for a medium use electricity home, so 2,700 kilowatt hours of electricity consumption, a normal electricity bill would be £872. But if you apply a 30% discount on the unit rate of that bill on the electric side, your tenant's saving around the £200 mark. Note they still need to pay the full standing charge on this particular tariff. So the total saving on their bill will be 23%. Doesn't matter what their heating type is. So this can apply to gas heated homes, air source heat pump heated homes. The idea is that this is a saving on the electricity side of the bill, and it's really trying to create a big incentive for landlords to install lots of solar and battery and roll this out over all your properties. Having said that, you don't have to install an air source heat pump alongside the solar and battery. We've heard both from Paul and Simon that it can be a great adding solar and battery to the mix of air source heat pump can be a great way to bring your tenants' bills down too. So in the case of tenant power, what we're finding with landlords that we're partnering with and working with is they're looking at this as a way of, for want of a better word, softening the blow of rolling out air source heat pumps with their tenants. There's a lot of bad news out there, and tenants are worried about having to pay higher bills. And part of the reason for that is that, yes, air source heat pumps are 3 times more efficient than heating a home like a gas boiler, but gas is heavily subsidized and a lot cheaper, and 3 times cheaper than electric. So you're getting about price parity to run the two things side by side. So something like solar and battery and something like tenant power, where you can have that 30% discount, and now that same customer that I spoke about in the worked example saving £200, they're now saving kind of £400 plus on their bill. In terms of what you'd make as a landlord on the tenant power tariff, so we've recently kind of restructured how we pay out our landlords to make it as transparent and easy to understand as possible. And we're basically doing a payment per panel and payment per battery size. So that's £48 per panel, and then £73 for a small battery, £140 for a medium, £261 for a large. There's some specifications around this, and a standard panel we define as a certain output and a certain amount of generation per roof. But broadly speaking, just to give you a bit of a sense of what that could make back for you as a landlord, a 12-panel system with a medium 9.5 kilowatt-hour battery would generate around £716 annually back to you as a landlord. So the idea is that this tariff is really going to help supercharge and make grant funding go a lot further and help landlords really scale out solar across all the properties. In terms of how it's been going for us, so we launched in summer of last year. We launched alongside Together Housing Group, so a housing association based in Yorkshire. They've been experimenting with a form of tenant power for 5+ years, and they've really collected a whole load of learnings that we put into the design of this tariff. And they've got funding from the West Yorkshire Combined Authority to do 1,500 installs and move their tenants over to tenant power. So they're really looking to scale this from the get-go. We've signed up another 7 partners since launching with them, including a local authority here in London, and a bunch of other housing associations across Scotland and Wales too. So lots are starting to see the benefit of this, get their solar and battery linked up to tenant power so that they can make a return back as well as their tenants saving. Thanks, Claire. That's all from me.
That's great. Thanks so much for taking us through that, Tom. I was really interested by the phrase you had about softening the blow of installing air source heat pumps, because obviously heat pumps get talked about so much in the context of potential benefits for residents and potential benefits for the environment, and we hear so often about the challenges or potential challenges with that. So it's a really interesting idea that kind of solar might be kind of route into that and opening up some of those discussions. And I suppose comes back to the point that both Simon and Paul touched on the idea of actually this is something that tenants are often very keen on, and this can be a means of kind of engaging tenants. Thank you. We're moving into our audience question section of the discussion now. We have about 25 minutes left, so I'm going to try and get through as many as possible. And I've had loads in already, but I always like more. So if you do have anything you want to ask, go ahead. Tom, I'm going to come to you first with a direct question for you, which follows on from your presentation. This is a question from Ellie, who would like to know, is the calculated return on investment for the solar and storage system inclusive or exclusive of maintenance, repairs, repairs and replacement costs?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So the return on investment calculations just flashed up on the screen is a very simple back of the envelope. This is how much you could stand to make in a year on one of those houses, and roughly how much would it cost to install all that kit, and one divided by the other. It's really important to make sure that you've got operations and maintenance kind of covered as well. We heard briefly from Simon that the warranties on a lot of these bits of kit are constantly being extended out. I think on average now solar's been at kind of 20-25 years plus for some time, but on the battery side we're seeing kind of 12 years up to 15 years of product warranties on those bits of kit now. So you are covered for a long time from a product perspective, but inevitably things go wrong and you need someone to go back and fix those bits of kit. The great thing with something like Tenant Power is that you're not now just investing in a whole load of kit that you're going to have to find some money to cover off the operations and maintenance in the future, but you've actually got a return coming back. So what a lot of our partners are doing is they're putting some of that money aside to cover their operations and maintenance costs, and the rest they're using to really speed up the rollout of new install too.
That's great. Thank you, Tom. I'm coming across to you next, Paul. Alice has a question about, you mentioned earlier about the approach of sort of mapping out solar deployment and deciding which homes might be most suitable for it. And Alice says, I'd be interested to know what AI Clarion uses to map out solar development.
Sure. So it's not our AI. We found a company a few years ago called Power Market, and there's a couple of others out there now. Kestrix do it. There's one called Spotter AI, where it just maps the size of the roof and can essentially calculate what the array could look like, and looks at the shading and direction, pitch. And it's not an exact one. I mean, everything always comes back down to you have to go to the home to do the precise calcs. But what it does give you is a pretty good idea, gets you 80-90% of the way there. When you start looking at, having that conversation with the customer about what they might see as a benefit to that. And the other key part for us is then understanding, what are the financials, and that means that we can start having conversations, whether it's an Octopus model or other things. There's several solutions out there at the moment that can do this, but the one we used was a company called Power Market at the time.
Thanks, Paul. Simon, you've got your hand up.
I just wanted to add into that, Paul, were you able to, in any way, shape or form through AI, understand where there may be restrictions set by the grid to support where you were going to select your properties? Was that an option, or was that just hit and miss?
So in the solution we used, it wasn't an option, but what we are looking at doing is mapping that into GIS. So we've got that information. We've got the kind of DNO. We know we cut across, I think, 4 different DNOs. A large proportion of our properties are in UK Power Networks area, so we're looking at that first. But part of what we're now doing is trying to map what's the DNO's capacity and potentially where they're going to be working to improve grid resilience, and then we can map that against our programs, because that theoretically means it might help us understand where we're going. It might mean where we want to engage with the DNO to say, actually, we're looking to do this. Is there any mileage in you doing that? Because there's an awful lot of things that have to line up, what we might want to do financially, which customers you want to do first, which properties can take the solution, and where the grid actually works. Getting all 4 of those things to line up in one go is very hard.
Not easy. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks both. Simon, I'm going to come back to you now if I could for this question, which I suspect ultimately I may open up to your fellow panelists as well. This is from Tom. He's asking, is there anything to consider if we're currently installing solar but not yet pursuing battery installs? I.e., is there anything we can do to future-proof the install so that batteries could be installed at a later date?
I think most of the modern PV systems, i.e. the inverters, are upscalable and have the facility. I think just being solid in your specification, I would reach out to manufacturers and just ensure that their system is future-proof. And when you're installing PV, just ensure that that spec is watertight and that it is delivered. But I think, in honesty, and Tom and Paul might be able to back this up, is it's probably par for the course these days. I don't think if someone had a PV inverter that wasn't scalable with batteries in the future, they probably wouldn't sell any. So I would say it's probably quite common in the market nowadays.
Excellent. Tom, you're nodding. Did you want to add anything on that?
No, absolutely. Just agreeing there with Simon. You've got you can add batteries onto any systems nowadays. You've just got AC coupled batteries. So, but if you did want to prepare, I guess you could think about installing hybrid solar inverters. So you can just kind of come at a later date and plug the battery straight in. But what I say to that is consider installing the battery now with the solar. I think more and more battery prices are absolutely plummeting. We've seen them come down kind of tenfold in the last 5 years, and that's just going to continue to come down. And as soon as you have a battery in the property, that's when you can start doing all of the smart flexibility stuff on the grid, and that's when you can really start to make the most of varying energy prices, locking into these smart tariffs and really eking the best benefit out for your tenants. So we're big advocates of solar with battery. So I'd say if you're considering that, start to find ways of doing that right now.
Thanks, Tom. Simon, I'll come back to you in a sec. Paul, did you want to say anything first?
No, I totally agree with Tom. I mean, our whole strategy is geared around batteries. I think not only from a technology point, but actually conversations with customers, because they have solar's the most understood renewable technology for obvious reasons. But yeah, they understand the benefit of the battery. So again, we've had, where we were looking to do it without a battery, we've had a bit of pushback. We have the conversation, but actually the customer journey, and if you're trying to decarbonise anything, and I mean, if you want to go one step further, you ideally would do the air source heat pump at the same time, and you essentially do everything, and that really works the battery hard. But you then end up with how much can you afford to deliver in one go compared to how much work you've got to do. So I think that's, what the ideal is, but the financial challenges that sit behind that actually can be a bit prohibitive. But yeah, batteries alongside PV all day long.
Thanks, Paul. Simon?
It was just exactly going to mirror what Paul was saying, where batteries do support solar perfectly, but where it isn't an option for cost reasons. And if you do, we talked about solar diversion earlier on. If you have hot water tanks within your housing stock and have no plans to remove those, then solar diversion is such a cheap option to take that excess energy, heat hot water, and ultimately give you hot water through probably 8 or 9 months of the year. So it's an option that we would certainly consider if you have the hot water systems within your stock.
Thanks, Simon. And speaking of surplus energy, Charlotte asks, how can we set up for surplus energy across different buildings? For example, having a large system on one block to then redistribute to individual houses that can't have solar. Paul, can I perhaps start with you on that one?
Cool, that's a technical one to throw my way. And I'll speak very simply as a simple person. So theoretically, it can be done. So there are models where you can do it in the individual home. There's a couple we talked about, I think, on flat. So a couple have looked at sole share and emergent, do that kind of thing where you can balance off different energy levels in there. I think for us, and probably the whole sector, you can't have a situation where just because you live in a 4-bedroom house, you get all the benefit from solar, and somebody who lives in a 1-bedroom bungalow that's surrounded by trees doesn't. The technology can still work, but it won't work as well. So I think you have to kind of look at the technology as a whole, and then possibly Tom can talk to where where the sort of energy sector is going to kind of enable that micro generation, microgrid kind of scenario around, looking at whether that's part of our place-based approach, is for future proofing to get to a point where, regardless of where the solar is, arguably you can, using a battery, push energy to the right place in the right people. But that starts to get a bit more technical and very much above the level of understanding that I have.
Thanks, Paul. I think you're doing yourself down. That was a really good answer. Simon, do you want to pick up on that? I mean, and Paul started to touch there on the idea potentially of sort of organisations building their own microgrids. Talk us through that as well.
Yeah, like you say, we talked about energy aggregation, and Loom SolShare is the sort of main provider of those systems where you can take energy from one set of solar panels and move it. Obviously, there's a cost associated to that, and it's multiple surveys, and it's a case of probably weighing up the cost versus reward in terms of installing and delivering those systems. Yes, microgrids, energy initiatives between communities, they are options, and I think that involves a lot more collaboration, but I certainly think that avoiding future energy hikes and things like that, they really do come into play as an option these days, most definitely.
That's great, thank you. Tom, did you want to add anything on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple points on that. So our tenant power intends to do exactly that. It's trying to kind of democratize the benefit you're getting from a system and not have it be a bit more of a kind of roof shape direction pointing lottery, in terms of, like Paul said, if you're unlucky and you're stuck behind a big tree or don't have the biggest roof, you're not going to make the most of that solar when it gets installed. So something like our tenant power tariff has a fixed 30% discount for everyone taking part. And crucially as well, what landlords quite like is that in the winter months when the sun's not shining as much but bills tend to be a bit higher, you're still getting access to that 30%, so it can kind of tide you through those winter months too. Just a quick other point on how you share around the savings. So I definitely recommend our guests to go and Google our shapeshifters tariff. So it's for commercial at the moment, but if you've got solar on, say, a big warehouse, but then you want to make the most of that benefit in some other buildings you've got, we can actually link that together so that when you're generating that solar in one geographical location, you're actually getting the savings in another. And on an individual house level at the moment, I think a little while ago, we launched a solar sharing option. So if you are lucky enough to own your own home and have solar on it, and you are exporting to the grid, you can actually choose to donate that excess energy through our solar sharing scheme to people who are kind of more in need. And to bring it back to social housing landlords, this is where get onto an export tariff for your solar, get on something like tenant power where you're generating a return on all these assets, and then you can choose exactly where to put that money yourselves. Put that into the harder buildings like flats and help people on their bills there. But as soon as you start generating your own revenue, then you can have a lot more agency to divide that up between all of your tenants.
Thanks, Tom. Simon?
Just to add to that, whilst you're Googling shapeshifters as a tariff, another really good example to help your understanding of what these community initiatives can look like. If you guys just Google repowering London, there was a scheme in Brixton, which was a big community initiative that gives you, there's a lot written about it, but gives you a really good feel for what can be achieved and how it can be done. It's quite a large scale version, but it's a good read.
That's great. Thank you, Simon. We're getting on there, or have started to get on there, I suppose, to a point that has come throughout today's session, which is kind of resident engagement and ensuring that residents understand the benefits, ensuring that there's democratization. I think, Tom, you put it really well, of these benefits. Let's talk a little bit more about that and a little bit more about the importance of resident engagement. And I suppose in part this relates to a question that has come through from Maria, who says, are social landlords being expected to teach residents how to get the best use out of solar and batteries to save money, or do we leave them to find out for themselves? Some tenants are not as aware as others or able to do this without support. Paul, you really stressed within your presentation the engagement work that you and colleagues have done at Clarion, and you were talking about show homes, and you were talking about quite involved efforts to engage residents in this. Can you talk to us a little bit more about this? I mean, I was really struck, as I mentioned at the time, by that figure you said of 86% of Clarion tenants being keen to see solar installed. That is really high. So talk me through all of that, and talk me through that, I suppose, with the prism of Maria's specific concern of is this something that social landlords are going to need to take on responsibility for to support tenants to get the most out of this?
Yeah, sure. Interestingly, the 86% was a cold survey with very little backup. So actually,
wow,
that's how ready people are for it. It's like I say, we did a whole host of the renewables, and that came back unbelievably high. So that kind of shows the level of understanding and kind of want for this type of technology. I think when it comes to, and it's, anyone that works in social housing will know this, every person is different. Some people you can just let and forget. I think the bit you have to take into account is you can't assume a certain demographic or a certain person or this needs to be done in a certain way. What you need is a suite of, this is all the way from come into my house, stick it on my roof, send me the app, never talk to me again. We've got some of those, all the way to people that actually, they don't want it on an app and they want to know how to press the button. That's my dad, to be fair. I want to be able to turn it on and off and set it to 18 degrees. And that's my level of control. That's what I need. And then there's things in between about, Tom touched on different tariffs. Telling somebody that an energy provider is going to control their heating actually can sound quite, but actually the benefits around that are really great. And we found this when we've talked about IoT devices. If you ask a customer about remote monitoring in a survey, it's a hard no. But no one's ever said no to us putting one in their home. And it's because we explain why we're doing it and what the benefits are. And this is exactly the same thing. If you said to somebody, I'm going to stick all this on your house and we're going to control how you heat it, you're not getting in the front door. Explain to them about, they just have to set it like this. It will always keep it to that temperature. And it goes back to that sort of post-evaluation bit where you can evidence it. And I'll give you an example of, in the very initial SHGF demonstrator wave, which we did back 4 or 5 years ago, we had a lot of challenge with residents, particularly in sort of out in small villages where they had a chimney and we were blocking that as part of air tightness, and we were getting pushback by going, no, because when there's a power cut, that's how I heat my home. So, okay, so we had to go. Now, actually, what we were able to do the following year is people that had insulation put on, that had solar panels, we were actually able to show them, because we'd had a monitoring device in there, how little heat was required in a 24-hour period, and that their house actually only dropped 1 degree, that if there is a power cut, which actually is very rare, you don't need to light a fire, because actually if you have all this technology and you have the insulation, actually that's future-proof, and you don't need that, so you will end up with a more thermally efficient home. And guess what? If there is the occasional power cut, it doesn't matter, because your house will only drop 1 degree over a 24-hour period. So that's where the evidence piece comes back in, because you can show people diagrams and you can show people graphs. And how we tackled with that is we did customer videos that actually resident liaison officers have on an iPad that they can show customers. So it's not Clarion telling them, it's not the contractor, it's not Octopus, it's actually their own peer group, which actually is really powerful. And those videos weren't all amazing stuff. It was, it did take a bit of time, and sometimes, you have to, especially with the installation, it's a bit longer. But that honesty, but there's a benefit at the end of it, paid massive dividends. And actually we've seen that take up and that pick up on non-access across the last 4 or 5 years as we've done this drastically improved, because we've used that customer base to talk to their peers to help us get in and understand.
Thanks, Paul. That's great. Simon, I will come to you. I'm just going to come to Tom first. Tom, give us your reflections on this issue of engagement and explaining, as Paul was touching on, the different, or meeting the needs of different residents who may be interested in different levels of information.
Yeah, absolutely. None of it works without considering that and really having a good option for it. I mean, it's something that we've always been really keen on as we've grown as a company. So in fact, the way that we're structured, our energy specialist team. So if you're a customer of ours and you pick up the phone, you'll get through to our energy specialist teams. They're divided up geographically, and they all teams take care of 50,000 customers in a certain area, and that's done on purpose so that if you ask someone who phones up quite a few times, you might well get through to the same person. And we can kind of give really tailored and nuanced advice that helps people and is useful. And caters for, like you said, from those who actually just don't want to talk to anyone and work out stuff on an app to someone who really needs help, and in some cases in-person help. We're one of, I think, the only big energy providers to still have field teams and door knockers and people actually approaching people who want to talk to someone in person. We also do, you can still have your energy bill with us via post. You don't have to have it via online. We still have customers some customers who use post and write us lovely handwritten letters. So it's just understanding that everyone will have a different level in terms of how they want to engage on these things, and actually just installing the solar and battery and expecting that move on to the next one, people are going to see the benefit and save is not enough. So that's where it's really key as well. And what we're always trying to do with our smart tariffs is make it as simple and easy for people to use as possible. So taking a step back on our zero bills tariff, which I haven't touched on today, the idea of that is you install all the kit, the solar, the battery, the air source heat pump, and it is zero bills. It's very easy to understand. Something like tenant power, it's a discount, and people are seeing that in their account every month. So it's reinforcing that point that, yes, my landlord's invested in this kit, they've set this partnership up with Octopus, and I'm actually getting a benefit out of this, and that's improving my quality of life. So I think it's incredibly important, something that we're really focused on.
Thanks, Tom. And really interesting to hear you talk about face-to-face contact and the idea of someone phoning up and potentially getting through to the same person, and the importance of kind of continuity, I suppose, because that speaks also, I think, to some extent to what Paul was talking about having liaison offices and having face-to-face conversations and the importance of that. Simon, I'm going to come to you. We've got 3 minutes left, so I'm going to be very unfair and ask you to be brief if I can.
I will do. The benefit of working with multiple housing associations and local authorities is we see lots of different approaches that work well and some that don't. We have a resident handbook that is delivered at resident engagement meetings prior to pre-works. That is also given to residents at the end of the project. It's given to them during, depending on how often they'll engage with us. A lot of our clients create their own pamphlet around getting the best out of solar. One of the other approaches that we've seen is, so certainly as a HA, I would have your contractors and your installers ensure that there is a handover process, and one that actually kind of migrates over to when that resident's moved out and someone's moved in that's new 6 months later, the pack and the information can be left and be given to those to that new resident. So that's quite an issue we see. And then lastly, in terms of making it accessible to everyone, your young residents to your 90-year-olds who are tech sort of technophobes, we have the paper format, and we're also working on a kind of virtual home whereby you can go into each measure, cavity, loft, EWI, solar, heat pumps, and there are some sort of explanations around how simple they are to use, what the benefits can be. Very interactive and simple, because I think we've all seen that a number of residents do take multiple conversations to really get through and just hit the points that make the difference for them as a resident. So multiple approaches, definitely lots out there and lots more to explore.
Thanks so much, Simon. So I think the answer to Maria's question there is that absolutely engagement is crucial, but probably also lean on your partners to be helping you with that kind of effort. We have unfortunately come to the end of our time, and I have to apologise to anyone who has asked a question which I haven't managed to get to. There have been loads of them. Thank you so much for popping them all through. Some folk have asked about whether we can go back through some of the data, for example, that were shared in the presentations. Just a reminder, you'll be sent an on-demand recording of this webinar as soon as it's made available within the next few days. So you'll be able to go back through to your heart's content and to have a look at all the material that's been shared. Also, if I haven't managed to get to your question, what I will do is perhaps impose on our panelists and see if I can get some answers via email for you. So if you haven't had your question raised, they may still be able to get you an answer. I want to thank our panelists today for sharing their time and their expertise. Thank you, Simon, Paul, Tom. Thanks, of course, to SureServe for supporting today's event. And thanks to all of you for joining us and for your questions. I really hope you found it a useful and interesting discussion. Thanks again, and see you next time.
Thanks.